I wrote my new book, The Art of Caring Leadership, to be both a wake-up call and an invitation for leaders who want to uplift their teams and organizations by putting their people first. Most of us think we care, but caring leadership is about doing, taking action in a way that makes a tangible difference to our teams and our workplaces. Now, more than ever, at any time in history, we need to know what leading with heart actually means for us, for our workplaces, and for the world. The Art of Caring Leadership is a practical guide that will help you decipher what caring leadership means in practice through a framework that uncovers the steps you can take every single day. If your people know you care, not just about what they do, but who they are and can become, they will move mountains. To pre-order your copy of the book, visit theartofcaringleadership.com. In this episode of the Leadership at Heart podcast, you hear me speak with Taneshia Nash Laird, the president and CEO of Newark Symphony Hall, which is a 1925 performing arts center in Newark, New Jersey. Boy, when you hear us talk and the story she tells about the community surrounding her and the history that's there, you'll hear the deep compassion. You'll hear the reason why I invited her on the show. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. It's Heather with the Leadership at Heart podcast. And today I'm very excited to have Taneshia Nash Laird on. And she's someone who came to me. It's rare that someone reaches out to me and I let them come on my show. So she had some other folks that were kind of positioning her for podcast. And I loved what I saw about her background. And when you hear it, and then when you hear her, you'll know why. So that is why you're on the show. They whatever they did a good job actually telling me that you should be a good guest on the show. I'm telling you, it's maybe happened 3 times in 3 years. So
Hey, thanks.
Most everybody comes to me from referrals, from previous guests, from listeners, or from just somebody who's ever, or I hand pick them. So I'm very excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, especially knowing that it's very rare that someone pitches you and you accept. So yes. I'm excited to be here.
Where are you anyway, right now in your leadership journey?
That's a great question. Thank you. I am right now leading a not-for-profit that is essentially a turnaround. It is running a 95-year-old historic performing arts center in a community of color, which is one of the reasons that I was attracted to the role. And the organization, if you would look at it on a sort of that organizational life cycle, it wasn't just in the decline, it was in crisis. So I guess I'm turning around a historic organization and venue and leading it through the crisis, because as we record this, we are still in the global pandemic.
Wow. So you got like the pandemic and then you got crisis on top of crisis. So you got
That's right.
Layers of it going on and you're still smiling. So I don't know what's happening here. You're good, man. They needed a resilient leader and they got you.
Resilience probably is that's a great word, because that probably does describe my background professionally and personally. This is my third nonprofit that I've run. I've been both a for-profit and a nonprofit leader and a municipal appointed official. So I've done a different, I guess they call it, Harvard Business Review calls it the tri-sector leader, right? You've done public, private, government, and that's also something else that I bring to this role from a perspective.
I love that. I never thought I'm the same way. I didn't know I was tri-sector now.
That's right. We're tri-sector, Heather. Yes.
You're so amazing. Well, so this current organization, so you've been there now how long?
I celebrated 2 years just a few months ago.
Okay. And then, so how would the people that are under your leadership, how would they define your leadership style?
That's a really great question. I like to think that I'm a compassionate leader. Again, one of the things that happened when I came there is to found that not only had the building been neglected, but the people had been as well. The building needs a $40 million renovation. So that's also what I'm leading. I'm leading like a pretty significant capital campaign to renovate the building, but also turn around the organization. So it's probably about $50 million. And they had an opportunity to interview me during the search process. I was placed by a headhunter, so you go through all those different. And what was really interesting is that the questions that they asked, they're mostly community members, was, well, how can you do this? And so I like to think that I'm also a more of a coach, but I want to talk to you about that because you're the expert in all of this stuff. I don't think I'm coaching as much as I would like, because a lot of what I'm doing is supporting them in terms of their journey, in terms of their careers, because what became very apparent is that they hadn't been invested in professionally in terms of developing their skills.
Good for you. Good for you for going in and seeing that. And I bet you that's very valued and appreciated by those who, again, they look to you for guidance and leadership. And if you have that perspective that you need to kind of coach them through the process and be there to guide them through the process, and that's a role you're playing and needs to, in order to heal the organization, that's just, kudos to you.
I love that you describe it as healing. I actually commissioned a study from a consulting expert because I did notice that there were some things that I was asking some of the staff to do that they couldn't do, despite the fact that they had been there maybe about 10, 15 years in some cases. And so I described it as a skills gap analysis. And the consultant, which I identified this particular consultant because the leader of it had experience in this particular space. She was a woman of color. She had been used to working in urban environments. But ultimately, what they found and said was that the staff couldn't do the things that they just literally didn't have the skills, so they created a list of all the things that the staff member by role would need to do their role. And they had these sort of 3 dimensions: lacked the skill, needed improvement, or were adequate. And they were all in the first 2 columns.
Oh,
right. And so the decision was, do I get rid of all of the staff and start over, which is probably what you do in sort of a corporate environment. But here, this is a not-for-profit. And again, it's a not-for-profit. And though we are a community performing arts center, I also really sort of view us as sort of a community organization. And again, I felt that it was important to invest in those people. And the reason that I know that I was right is that because we were also tracking for another 6-figure deficit. When I inherited the organization, we were losing about $250,000 annually and had about $1 million, near $1 million in accumulated debt, including a 10-year-old utility bill of $250,000. And we fixed all of that in the first 7 months and with the same people. So what I like to say is that they were really punching above their weight because I was asking them to do a lot, but it was very targeted and it was very focused in terms of the activities. And then, we also put together a customized professional development plan for each of the employees as well, each of my colleagues. But it was a lot. It was a lot. You probably weren't expecting all this, were you, Heather?
No, that's good stuff, though. I mean, I think it's really good stuff. Yeah, you're right. Like in a corporate environment, they'd be like, "Yeah, we got to get some other people."
Yeah.
Like this is just
not because they have
work.
Different motive, right? I mean, it's just about return on investment for shareholders, whereas in a not-for-profit, it really is investment on impact to the community. And so that's the way that I approach that.
Yeah, I just think when we think about all of that the deficits in their abilities, I just think of this idea of them being withering vines. And so, some vines you can't bring back. Like they're so far gone that no matter how much water you give, right now, how much you feed them that plant food, right, they're just not coming back. And then I think there are the withering vines that just need that love, that care, that attention, that appreciation. You saying, I value you as a human. Wow. Anybody listening to that? Wow.
You and I might take for granted the opportunity to go to conferences or do professional development workshops. They had never had that. So the first few months was just that. We even went on a retreat, like one of those leadership retreats on a 100-acre campus. It was donated to us. The retreat services were donated to us, nice. And it was team building, and it was great. And I'm gonna tell you, not everybody took to it though, because it was different. But I think, it showed that my willingness to invest in them, because I wanted to pour into them in the same way in my career. I hadn't had that sort of development early on.
Oh, okay. So there's the idea of like being poured on, I want to pour into them like that, that is just, brilliant, number one. But again, for those who are listening, like these are the nuanced things that it's all about the focus of the leader, right? And in this case, Taneshia was focused on the people and healing the people and filling the gaps in the people's skills, not in the people themselves as humans. And it made a huge difference. And of course, they're still battling and they still have the stuff you're trying to move forward with. But like you were saying, the things that you're able to accomplish through the same exact people with a little love and care and some additional watering and some of that food, right? That's huge, just huge.
I love that what you're saying. You're giving me language to describe it, because you're right. It wasn't, they're amazing people, had nothing to do with them as people. In my view, I viewed this sort of as a failing of a number of structures, but that's a whole different show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you know what? Like I think when we go back to the corporate world, where I do a lot of my work. I've been in nonprofit, I've been in government, same as you, and I've been in for-profit the majority of my career. But thinking about this idea of like the throwaway employee, we can't just throw people away, and they deserve their spot in the sun, and we need to take the time to cultivate, and that's what you're doing.
What I was going to say is that for some people, it was a struggle, right? Sort of. But then I also saw something else. And that's why I said this is a lack of investment. There was one person that there was not a single thing that I asked her to do that she could not do. And so for me, that also showed that, not sort of investing in people that have incredible potential. And imagine if this had happened sort of earlier in her work life and work career, she wouldn't be support. She probably would be management and higher. And so that's one of the things why I said there's a whole bunch of other structures at play here that I think need to be examined.
Yeah, that's kind of cold. That's worldwide, right? Like that's at all levels when we talk about the structures of all. Yeah. So I get where you're going. Some of these things are microcosms of the bigger thing that's happening in the world, and we just keep getting reminded of it. And the good thing about it is I always tell people, like, as a leader, whether you lead a team of 1, a team of 2,000, whatever, you have the positive power to change the lives of those you lead, and just superpower. It's just like, so yeah, you can't change every single structure in the world, but you can change your structure because you have the power to do that.
Right. But I'm going to tell you that I definitely have a weakness, though. So what I noticed is that for people that I mentor, I'm definitely very coachy, right? I'm very coachy, and I'm like, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. One of the things I have to figure out how to balance is being that compassionate person, but also still really setting some good expectations, some firm expectations. It has to be there, because in order for the organization to move forward, it can't just be that I'm, coddling all the time. So absolutely. I'm just sort of I'm still figuring that out in terms of a balance. I think it's because I'm not just at a new organization, but a totally new environment. I had never worked in this city either. So I think that was also sort of getting an understanding of the landscape and understanding of the culture, because there absolutely is a culture in that particular city. So yeah, that's something else I'm working on for your audience. And I understand that I have to still work on that.
Well, I think this is the key, is that I don't invite perfect leaders on. Well, there's no such thing. My show is so great because I highlight the imperfection, and how that in the imperfection is where the brilliance is at. So we're gonna get there here in a little bit, where I'm going to talk to you about that, but because that's always the crux of the show.
The question is no longer, is remote work here to stay? But rather, what does the future of remote work hold, and how can we best prepare for it? As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to take the world by storm, and employees continue to learn how best to work from home, keeping those employees engaged and productive has been an unprecedented challenge for leaders everywhere. At Employee Fanatics, we've been keeping our ears to the ground and intently listening to employees for months to discover what their needs are in this moment, and perhaps more importantly, how those needs will evolve in the coming months. Our new thought paper, Work from Home and Work from the Heart, Reimagining the Future of Remote Work and Employee Engagement, is the culmination of that careful listening process, and will guide you and every leader within your organization to reimagine the ways in which you can use work from home processes to engage and empower every team member. To download your copy, visit employeefanatics.com today.
Let me ask you this, though. I'm curious to know, where does your drive to lead come from? Where did it stem from?
Again, I think it stems from sort of my own lived experience, my own story. I grew up in a very working class environment, but in a sort of wealthy area. So, sort of had that juxtaposition. So I could see, sort of the world around me, and I can see all of the things that swirl. That's my why for the sector that I work in, but I think it's also my why for how I approach the work.
For those who are listening, listening to all the great work you've done, we always, come to the point of the podcast where we really want to dive deeper into a time when maybe you were not the most enlightened leader. You weren't the leader that maybe was as compassionate. What, if you can tell a specific story, like something that pops into your mind, and what you did to come out of it to really evolve as a leader. It doesn't mean you're perfect. Again, it just means that maybe, you changed in that regard. Maybe the thing that was your weak point that shows up in that story has either been fixed or has been minimized or whatever. I'd be curious to know what that might be.
I think understanding the compassion part in terms of being a leader, especially when you need to make staff changes. I remember my first nonprofit role about 15 years ago now, where I had to make a staff change. And I really feel like I could have done that better. I could have been more compassionate. It was just like, yep, sorry, this is your last day type of thing. I feel like sometimes you do have to make changes. And I think I'm better at it, if there's such a thing. I mean, it's still a horrible thing that you have to do to meet the objectives. And the most recent case, frankly, is the pandemic. And so loss of revenue and inability to continue to carry a full staff. So I feel like I'm better at that. I know that's probably not the type of thing that you were thinking of, but yeah, I'm better at laying people off, Heather.
Well, I get, what, here's the thing. One of my very first articles on LinkedIn, when I just even entered into this space, was on how to lay people off with dignity. And it was because I'd gone through my only layoff in my whole life. And in the process, after, so it was like painful. Obviously it's always painful to do it. But then like the process after I kind of walked out the door was a very, one that was filled with care and concern, and they took care of me. And so I get it. The entrance and the exit are equally important. And so the compassion that you talk about is absolutely critical. It's even more critical now during that time when you're and in the case where it's not any fault of their own, in this case, like the pandemic, where it's like, I just can't do it. We can't afford it. So you have your own sense of things, but again, having that back end support and the compassion. I always tell people when we're looking at those difficult conversations, it's easier to come at those conversations when we've built a foundation of trust already. So there's a relationship, a rapport. They know that you're looking out for them. So when you go to have those difficult conversations where it's helping them course correct in something they're doing, it is just, it comes off differently. They don't leave there angry. They leave there kind of disappointed in themselves. They say, I could have done better. And that's because I know he or she really cares for me. And I really should have just, raised the bar in my behavior. It's a different way than like, how dare she? And you're like, so mad, because they know you and they know where it's coming from your heart. Totally different places,
Yeah, it's still difficult. Please don't get me wrong.
It is
difficult.
I mean,
it's very difficult, especially, nowadays you have to do everything sort of, I guess in all these situations, you have to do everything particular legal way. And
yes,
so it doesn't leave as much room, but as much room as it leaves, I take for that compassion. Yeah.
I love that. That's just amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious for leaders right now that might be struggling in their leadership or, just need a little extra motivation to get through this time with people that are looking in for guidance. What might be a couple pearls of wisdom you would leave them with?
Wow, that's a great question. I think pearls of wisdom. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking about the moment that we're in right now. And what I hope is that everyone is understanding that right now, this is not, I keep telling my own children, this is not normal times. So, sort of the things that you would typically do, that you would say, oh, during a crisis, I would do this. But, it's a global crisis. So I think, my gosh, I don't even know how to answer the pearls of wisdom. I'll tell you the things that I attempted to do in my own organization. We lost people, people plural, at the top of the pandemic, and 2 staff members lost 6 family members between them. And we also lost a former staff member. Most recently, we lost a staff member as well. And the thing that I told them is, this work is important, but your self-care and your health is actually more important. So if you need to take off some time, if you need to let me know, just let me know. I need to take off some time. I think that's giving their colleagues some space during this time, and to be understanding that it's high stress. During this time, I've also seen a lot of, particularly women, actually just straight up leave the workforce. But I think having open conversation, is there anything that I can do to help you navigate through these times? That's the only thing that I can think of. I don't know if that's a big pearl of wisdom. I know that that's something that I did. I also encouraged and brought in a counselor to talk to the team, particularly during those early days when we were literally losing people and bodies were dropping in our community. We were a hot spot for our state in terms of death from COVID-19 complications. So yeah, I don't know if this is evergreen in terms of advice, but it definitely is advice for this moment in time.
Thank you. I think that's advice that's absolutely needed. I think we can't care enough. I often talk about this idea of empathy versus compassion, and empathy is feeling someone else's pain and sensing their pain and putting yourself in their shoes and understanding where they're at, and compassion is actually doing something about it. So you defined your main, characteristic as someone who's compassionate, and everything that you said has been completely aligned with that. And this thing that you just said about, asking if they need time off, bringing in a counselor, that is compassionate action. So, thank you for being that leader. Just so inspiring. And for those who are listening, I just know you've taken so much from even just this short time, and hopefully you've learned as much as I have from Taneshia. And just make sure you share this episode far and wide, and don't forget to write a review on Apple Podcast if it is something that you enjoy and you listen every week. I just found out last week that we're in 69 countries. So people in 69 countries. So you out there listening, you're all over the place. So Caring Leaders in Development, leaders with heart, those who strive to be there, are everywhere. And it's so exciting to know that you're along this journey with us. So Taneshia, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really a blessing.
Thank you again. Thank you for having me.
And everyone, thank you for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.